Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. And Rufai?
Yeah. The criticisms against the support of the two major controversial bills in Nigeria, the Social Media Regulatory and Hate Speech Prohibition Bill, are still on. Some critics say the aim of the Social Media Regulatory Bill is to curb the use of social media by Nigerians and limit the freedom of speech and their right to criticize policies and decisions of the government.
While others say that the hate speech prohibition bill, which seeks to criminalize the offense with death as a penalty, is uncalled for, the bill, sponsored by former Senate spokesperson, who is now the Deputy Senate Whip, Senator Sabi Abdullahi, is entitled the National Commission for the Prohibition of Hate Speeches Bill 2019. Although Senator Sabi Abdullahi has bowed to public criticism of the bill and expressed readiness to expunge the clause that recommends death by hanging as the ultimate penalty for the violators of the legislation.
But recently, Nigeria's First Lady Aisha Buhari has backed the proposed law for the regulation of social media. She says the issue of social media is a serious one, as China has been able to control its use for its 1.3 billion population, and says no reason why Nigeria cannot attempt controlling 180 million people. Some Nigerians have protested against the bill recently introduced in the Senate. They say its introduction is a plot to clamp down on free speech and public criticism. Well, joining us now from our London studios for a discussion on the legal pros and cons of the hate speech and social media bills is Dr. Charles Omole, a UK-based legal practitioner.
Thanks so much for the sacrifice, sir. And please, I just want you to break down this bill. You did an extensive job on your Twitter page as regards, the pros and cons of this bill. Just go straight ahead.
There are two bills.
There are two bills, yeah.
Both of them?
Both bills.
Okay, good morning. Well, if we start with the social media bill, first of all, my problem with both bills, really, is that the problems they are trying to solve are already covered by existing legislation. So I'm curious as to why government feel they need to go the route of creating these two bills. Now, on the social media bill, the first problem I have is that it gives government too much power to determine what is the truth.
Yes.
Truth can be subjective sometimes in terms of fact. I don't mean truth. I mean, what is fact? What is a statement of fact? Yes. So that is number one. Number two, it actually doesn't expressly include the government itself or its agencies as being liable for spreading falsehood. So Nigerians can be liable for spreading falsehood, but government cannot. Now, that, people will say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Number three, in terms of the safeguards within the legislation, I feel the legislation, as it's been popularly said, is largely copied from the Singapore bill, trying to do the same thing. But some of the safeguards in the Singapore edition has been excluded from the Nigerian version. For example, in the Nigerian version, if an order is given under the bill, for example, for a site to be taken down or for some notice to be put against a particular posting, you have a right to appeal to the law enforcement agency, which in this case is the police. And then if the police refuse your appeal, then you have a right to appeal to the High Court. Now, this is the problem. While you are appealing to the High Court that the decision under the bill is wrong, the High Court is expressly precluded from giving any injunctive orders. So High Court can't suspend the order under the bill while they are considering the case. So, which means whatever ban government puts on a particular website remains until that case is fully determined. You and I know in Nigeria, this could take months for it to happen. So that effectively gives a more draconian effect, as it were, to the bill that it would have otherwise had. For example, in the Singapore bill or law, that's now a law since the 2nd of October, they expressly included there that the minister, in this case is the minister in Singapore that has the power not the law enforcement agency. But the minister, if you appeal against a decision to under this act in Singapore, the law says there that the minister must respond to your appeal and make a decision within 2 days. 2 days. And then, if a decision is made, you have the law also expressly says if you want to appeal against the minister's decision, the High Court in Singapore must give you a date for your hearing within 6 days of you requesting it. So the conventional wisdom actually is that your entire appeal can be heard in a Singaporean court within 10 days. So that minimizes, so to speak, any effect of any ban to a short period of time. But in Nigeria, the police can tell you 6 months later that we are still considering your appeal. So, so it has and of course, by the time it goes to the court, that can take months, if not years, for you to get a verdict from the court. So the whole process as it is that, lawsuit, we know is being weaponized in Nigeria generally. There are lots of cases in our courts in Nigeria that we know have no merit, but the government on the agency will still sue people all the time, charge people rather, to court for all kinds of frivolous charges, knowing they have no case, but they want to use that charge to punish you because for about a year or two, your life is messed up. You could be in detention for all that period, and there are many cases where government end up not putting up a defense against you. So the whole idea of this bill is once the law enforcement agency makes a decision to ban a website or a content, you can appeal to the law enforcement agency, but no timeline is given as to when they have to respond. And you cannot appeal to the court until the law enforcement agency responds first. And once they respond, then you can appeal to the court. Now, while the court is hearing the case, they have no injunction power. So the order remains in place until the final determination of your case. Now, that can take a long time. The third problem I have with it is, the government can designate an online location, say a portal, a website, as suspicious, just by itself. And if they declare that as suspicious, they have the power to ban access to that website in Nigeria. Now, that for me is too draconian, the final thing, because of time, about this particular bill is that it doesn't explain whether it has a retroactive effect. For example, what happens to falsehood that's already online before the bill comes into effect? So will government say any falsehood that's online up until the time it comes to effect is okay? Or will it be retroactive? We don't know. The act is silent on that. And if we quickly go to the hate speech bill, my concern with that again is it focuses on harassment on the basis of race and ethnicity. But it doesn't talk about religious harassment. It doesn't talk about disability, harassment based on disability, or, as we know, gender-based harassment. All those were not mentioned in the bill. And also, government itself is expressly not included in part as a liable party for harassment.
Dr. Omole, I'm sorry for 2 bills, but we need to go on a break, and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. So let's go back to our conversation at the moment, which is the controversial bills in Nigeria, the social media bill and the hate speech bill. Dr. Omole, thank you so much for staying with us. It has been established that there's a false dissemination problem in Nigeria and in many other countries. You do agree to that as well. But there are those who say, perhaps the timing and the trust deficits that exist between the government and people of Nigeria might just be the problem here. Do you also agree with that? Because I was going through the extensive write-up you did about the social media bill. And if this is correct, how do we solve this problem without, encroaching on the people's rights, without denying them that right that is guaranteed by the Constitution to freedom of speech?
Well, thank you. It is true that I must first of all say that, yes, there is a problem of hate speech in Nigeria. There is a problem of incitement in Nigeria, as with many other countries. So in that sense, the government is not just manufacturing the problem. There is a problem to deal with. I guess where my challenge is with the solution the government is prescribing. To put up and to produce any legislation that earns the trust of the people, any act of parliament or the National Assembly must pass 3 tests. The first test before when you are putting a bill together is it constitutional? Is this bill, does it affect any constitutional rights of Nigerians? Well, a few days ago, the ECOWAS court says it doesn't, that this bill is not consistent with our constitution. But we may disagree on whether it agrees with our constitution or not. Let's say that's 50-50. The second test any legislation has to pass is a question, is it necessary? In other words, is this the only way of dealing with this problem? The Terrorism Prevention Act 2011, already deal with the problem of incitement. It's already criminalizing incitement to violence. That's already a criminal offense. The Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2015 already criminalizes dissemination of false information, as well as information harassment and insulting information and activities. So these things are already covered in the existing legislation. And I've not seen one instance since 1999, even before these laws came into effect, where the executive in Nigeria said, oh, we can't prosecute this person because we have no law under which to prosecute them. That has never happened since 1999. So if there's no case of the government struggling to prosecute people because of falsehood, why is it necessary to write this bill? So it doesn't pass the test of necessity. Then the third question that the test that any legislation has to pass is that, is it proportional? In other words, is this a proportional move to solve the problem we are trying to solve? And again, I'm saying it is not a proportional move, because the best the government could have done in this instance, if they really feel there are gaps in our law, is to amend the existing acts that I've just mentioned to address those areas, rather than a completely different act here, especially the hate speech bill that creates a new agency of government entirely, to that monitoring hate speeches. I think it's completely unnecessary. It's a waste of money, and I think the president is being badly advised by all the lawyers around him for their own personal hands in this instance.
Okay, Dr. Charles Omole, now the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, a 47-nation member parliament, has cited that hate speech includes exclusion from minority groups, alienation, marginalization, emergence of parallel societies, and ultimately radicalization. So we do know that hate speech exists. But in this situation, what are your recommendations for the Nigerian government?
Well, in this instance, I believe the Nigerian government has 3 options to deal with, to deal with the problem we have on hand. Number 1, scrap both of these bills, and have a more vigorous prosecution based on the existing laws. We've not, I think what we have right now is lack of political will to prosecute. You cannot create new laws to replace the executive's lack of diligent prosecution of existing laws. We have 3 guys or so, I don't know how many, I had a press interview, national interview on TV months ago, saying all the southerners from the northern Nigeria must vacate the north by a particular date. Were they prosecuted? No. What was needed in that instance is not new law. It's just lack of political will. So the first option the government have is scrap these 2 ideas, use the existing law and prosecute it to the maximum. That's the first option. The second option is, if indeed the government feels that there are gaps in our laws that need to be addressed, then amend existing laws, to cater for that. Don't create new laws entirely. Amend the existing acts to deal with areas you feel there are any lacunas or void in our jurisprudence. That's number 2. The third and final option I feel the government has is, if they really feel they have to proceed with this bill, by all means, then they need to take 3 things into account. Number 1, The Singaporean bill that they are copying in the social media bill, they had a 12-month consultation period in Singapore. You know, I don't know why we are rushing our own. So they need to have a long, extensive consultation period to get as many ideas of Nigerians into these bills as possible, not just a short one. Number two, limit the scope of these two bills. Any areas that are already covered by our existing laws should be excluded. So if they have to create a new bill at all, I don't think they should, but if they have to, limit it to only areas that you feel are not covered by existing law. So limit the scope. And number three, insert into both bills a sunset clause. A sunset clause of, say, 4 years. That means every 4 years, the National Assembly has to revisit these two laws and make a determination whether they still want it to remain on the statute or not. So that way, when we are visiting it again in 4 years, Nigerians can come to the National Assembly with evidence to show this is how these laws have been abused over the past 4 years. You should not renew these laws. So that creates a checkpoint every 4 years to determine whether this law should remain on a statute or not. I would not advise the law should be just drafted as it is in perpetuity. No.
All right. Well, that's a very big thank you, Dr. Charles Omole. But as we wrap things all up, is this something you're going to be taking forward? You know, those recommendations, are you going to be writing to the National Assembly or writing to these lawmakers or writing to your lawmaker representing your constituency in Nigeria to take it up from there? Well, maybe in good faith I may. I mean, at the end of the day, one we assume good faith on behalf of those promoting this legislation. If I sense good faith, I may do that. Otherwise, you might just be casting your pearls before swine. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I will think about it. If they're going to take it seriously and they're going to have a long, extensive public consultation, then people like me will be happy to engage with them to perfect this law, deal with the genuine problem government wants to deal with and should deal with, but also deal with implementation gaps and traps in this legislation that will make life difficult for Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles Omole, for being on the show today. We really do appreciate you. And that brings us to the end of the morning show today. Thank you for watching. I'm Adesoa Omoruan.
I'm Rufai Hussaini.
And I'm Sheyiton Atigari. Thank you for watching. You can also follow us on the social media handles showing on your screen. From our entire team here in Lagos, enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your day. Goodbye.